Perfect. Okay, I have the honor to start the fifth meeting of the Oceanpreneurs. Good afternoon, everyone. This is our fifth version of Meet the Ocean Entrepreneur webinar series under the PHAROS project. I'm Dimitris Kokkinakis. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Hub Athens, and it's my pleasure to host you today. Why we created the Oceanpreneurs? Our series is bringing together innovators, researchers, people who work with their own initiatives, entrepreneurs, policymakers, that they are working across Europe, but also beyond, as we will see also today, to accelerate solutions for ocean sustainability. We are focusing today on a crucial question for the future of the blue economy. And the question is like how we can empower ocean-based activities and grow them while protecting marine ecosystems and biodiversity. Before we move to today's session and brief you a little bit like with today's topic, I would like to go through like the eight part webinar series that we have been creating. We have already realized four themes. The one was like an intro to blue economy in order to frame the challenges and the opportunities ahead. The second one was focusing on tracking marine litter and plastic pollution. Then we were moving into valorization approaches, so how we transform waste into value through circular approaches. And then the most recent one was like on zero waste solutions and community actions in order to find out how we can have more cleaner seas, but starting also from the land. These conversations highlighted both the scale of the challenge, but also the potential of the innovation-driven solutions. Based on a study from JP Morgan, is estimated, it was recently published on the Times, is estimated that ocean-related activity that is called the annual gross marine product values at 2.5 trillion annually. And it's noted that ocean climate startups have raised over 5 billion in venture funding over the past decade. Most of them in early stage financing, meaning that there might be much more space and growth for the sector. What these seminars want to highlight as well, because they are happening under the umbrella of PHAROS and Citizens Leader Entrepreneurship Program, that I will say a few words in a while. They remind us that ocean sustainability is not only depending on the technology, but also on the collaboration, on the local knowledge, on the local talent with the entrepreneurs, and the ability to connect both the environmental impact with models that can work and they can bring change. So let's go into today's focus. We are focusing on sustainable agriculture and biodiversity. This is an important theme because like aquaculture is one of the big polluters as well of the ocean and is connected with the waste and the litter management. But I want to mention like two things, like the citizen litter entrepreneur and the regenerative aquaculture, they have a common objective, like is to restore the health and resilience of the marine ecosystems. But they do it also through a more community-driven innovation, and they go hand in hand. So for today's, like we will focus on sustainable aquaculture, regenerative ocean practices, biodiversity protection, and nature-based approaches to marine ecosystem restoration. While regenerative aquaculture focusing on rebuilding biodiversity and creating more sustainable food systems, with the citizens leader entrepreneurs, we find solutions like both in the section of the aquaculture or the regenerative aquaculture, but also how we can reduce and eliminate the marine pollution. Today we are going to see these intersections and how we can work through two very bright entrepreneurs and two bright examples. So moving forward, I would like to give a little bit the platform, who is the overall host of these ideas. Is the PHAROS project, is under the Mission Ocean umbrella. PHAROS is an EU-funded project, is led by Blocan, and is involving 24 partners across Europe, and we are focusing on deploying nature-based solutions for ecosystem restoration in Atlantic and Arctic regions. We are focusing on restoring marine ecosystems, combating pollution, and fostering a sustainable blue economy. Our work is mainly structured around three key pillars: reducing ecosystem degradation, decreasing ocean pollution, and addressing unsustainable exploitation. We have innovations. We come with innovations like from smart enhanced reefs to eDNA monitoring technologies, digital twin ocean systems, and an integrated aquaculture approaches. These innovations, they demonstrate how science, technology, and nature-based solutions can work together with entrepreneurship in order to restore marine ecosystems and support more sustainable ocean economies. This is especially relevant to today's topic, as sustainable aquaculture and biodiversity restoration requires more solutions, that they are not only technical sound, but also ecologically responsible, economically viable, but also connected to our societies. For this reason, we have a special moderator with us, as we do every time in the Ocean Entrepreneurs seminars. So I would like to invite Marion Besançon to join us. Is for Ifremer, who will moderate the discussion. Marion brings together expertise in marine science, biodiversity, and sustainable ocean management. Her work in Ifremer contributes to advancing knowledge and innovation for healthy ecosystems. So she's like an important actor and change maker within our ecosystems of the ocean. So she will guide the conversation among our two speakers, George and Marc. So I hand over to Marion to host the fireside and the conversation. Thank you, Marion, for joining us.
Thank you, Dimitris, and hi everyone. I'm really happy to be the moderator of this session. And just to give a few words about Ifremer, this is the only French research institute that is fully dedicated to the ocean. So basically, we say that we work from the abyss to the surface, from the coast to the high seas, and we will work totally in line with the ocean. So we are a research institute, of course, but we are working also with public authorities, giving expertise, and we are working, what is the point of today, with SMEs and entrepreneurs about innovation related to the ocean for the marine conservation, nature-based solution, and in the end, the goal is to have a sustainable blue growth. So enough about Ifremer. Let's talk about the two inspiring projects of today. So I will give the floor to first Marc García-Durán Huet, which is the founder and CEO of Underwater Gardens International. So a really nice and huge background of Marc promoting marine regeneration and sustainable tourism projects. You have integrated science, biotechnology, territorial design, and we're going to talk about underwater habitat restoration, biodiversity enhancements, and connecting entrepreneurship with marine conservation, with the idea, which is really, really nice, to move from exploiter of the ecosystem to caretaker and then gardeners, as you said. So Marc, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Merci, Marion. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I'm going to go straight to the presentation. You let me know if you can see it correctly.
Almost in full screen.
There you go. Yes. Okay.
Perfect.
So let's try to be brief. There were many issues when we started our purpose as a company that we wanted to readdress. One was how to connect, how to get funding, continuous funding, into the regenerative or the restoration operations in the long term. So we wanted to connect environmental action with finance. And to do so, we understood that first we need to recognize what were the technologies and the scientific knowledge that was already existing and which one was missing towards this mission of restoration of our oceans. In the mission of creating a toolbox of biotechnology that will allow us as societies to go ahead in the protection of natural capital and the services that nature is giving us. So with this purpose, we started our journey with some public funding like ENISA from the Spanish government, or COST, the COST program, to go ahead and develop on one side, under the idea of ecological engineering, reef hopper and the smart enhanced reefs, meaning the tools for creating substrates and the gardening tools to add to these substrates the elements, the bioconstructive species that are needed to create these marine animal forests. And under this capacity, we also promoted under Sergio Rossi's, our scientific chief, the MAF World, which is a community of experts around this idea of marine animal forests. With all of that, we created the idea, or we wanted to follow the idea of creating new to help perpetuate a marine animal forest and to be able, in the long term, in the medium long term, to reproduce this marine animal forest. So we call them, when there's the human nature, the human action involved, we call them sea gardens. And under this idea, we asked the European Union, the Horizon Europe Ocean Citizen within a consortium that is now developing these protocols and these ideas under 5 different ecozones, from the North Atlantic to the South Atlantic to the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. This idea of the sea gardens, when we started, there was no blue economy, there was no booming of this sort of financial support that was described at the beginning of this conference. And then we developed this idea of the Blue Innovation Hub, which means an intersection between the already existing vectors in a territory to finance the capacity to monitor and to implement sea gardens in the long term. This idea was recognized by the United Nations as one of the Decade of the Oceans Science and Sustainable Development ideas. But in the center of it all was this idea of how can we meet the needs of the financial world towards the needs of the environmental world. How can these apparently opposite worlds, this contradiction, can be solved, and we can find a common path, which I think is what we need in front of global change. With that in mind, we created, as I was saying, Reef Hopper. Reef Hopper, you will see, is a technology that allows to reach a biodiversity coefficient as a goal in any intervention. And that was noticed by BNP Paribas, who, as a bank, was very interested in understanding how they could help into this transition. So we understood that there was something missing in the equation that we found that the needs that the financial world were expressing and what was needed in the sea was a biodiversity carbon index that could be a reference or could be used to establish the measurements in the sea in order to link them with financing in the financial world. We've been developing that with a team co-funded by Underwater Gardens and BNP Paribas, and we are already publishing the results of these investigations to try to push the financial world into the not yet existing biodiversity credits as a market. So we believe that if we create a market in biodiversity credits, then we will go beyond the carbon credits, and we will go towards a paradigm in which we will have true tools to finance in the long term. So having all of this together, as I was telling you, we developed this biotech toolbox, this identification of the already existing technologies and companies providing those. And we also identify which technologies were not yet at the level that was expected. And also we thought that an ecological approach, a complexity approach was needed into the putting together the knowledge to really design properly, as I call it, the cloud process, the same way that the cloud is developed by the conditions of the atmosphere at a certain point. We want to develop a marine animal forest as a reaction of the conditions of a specific location. So we have developed a technology that has a protocol. The first part of the protocol is obviously the diagnose. Then you go into the analysis and transformation of the data into parametric data that allows for the development of a specific responsive design for a specific area. And all of this is under the idea of a biodiversity index target that is linked finally to the KPIs of the financial world. All of this puts together the possibility to recreate the marine animal forests and to have a clear financing for these operations. In the process, obviously, you all know all of these techniques. We put them together and we create, I can show you a little video of some of the interventions that we have done actually under European projects. As I was telling you, we're designing digitally the specific morphologies, the bionomics of regeneration, and we know how to develop the calculations, therefore, for this application in the bottom of the sea. Obviously, what we're trying to do is to connect in 3D the column of water, and therefore we're building these structures depending on the site conditions, depending on the water, the quality of the water, and also the physical characteristics of a location. We've been involved in several types of locations, from very anthropic locations to very natural locations. We've been able to engage the industrial world into our operations and even town halls like Barcelona in order to understand if we can create a new symbiotic relationship with the environment through this kind of operations. The technology actually has been proven to be very effective in terms of regeneration, in terms of speed of regeneration. And sometimes even the city has been, Barcelona, for example, has been very proud of announcing the various. But the most important thing is that somehow the industrial world, the financial world is understanding that this approach to design is being recognized and is important for this change of relationships with the environment. All of this has been recognized by the European Commission and is within the catalog of solutions and help us as a company, here I go into the business model, to provide services to both regions, private companies, so we can help them go into the direction of producing positive impact in the environment. So we've been developing all sorts of scales of projects, from very small scale projects like the Barcelona one to the compensation of industrialization of the natural space, like the maritime aeolic farms. Looking forward to create a circularity that completes the necessity for creation of energy, for example. And why we are here today is somehow because we are part of the consortium also of the PHAROS project, in which we are also attending the possibility to create this marine animal forest as an element to transform the impact that these aquaculture systems can have in the environment into a positive one. So thank you very much for listening. This is what we provide at Underwater Gardens. It's a biotech consulting services and technology provider.
Thanks a lot, Marc. Really inspiring. If you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we have a session of a Q&A at the end of this webinar. So feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll see just later. But now we move to the second really inspired project from George Birch. So we will move from the Med to the North Sea, and with the founder and business lead of Oyster Heaven. So this company was founded in 2021, and you're gonna talk to us about also restoring a marine ecosystem thanks to these amazing oysters. And you are one of the largest oyster restoration organization in Europe now, and especially dedicated in the North Sea and the British Isles. So please, George, the floor is yours. Thanks a lot.
So hopefully you can see a picture of the beach. And this is a very important place to me. I used to come here every year since I was a child, and I have these incredible fond memories of going raking for cockles and shrimping and eating things that my family plucked from nature with our hands. And there are a few places in this day and age where someone from a city would really feel like they were touching nature. It felt wild. But actually, as unfortunately we found out, this is a picture of a biodiversity crisis, because this photo is exactly the same stretch of beach just 120 years ago. And there are probably more oysters in this one photo than are left in the whole of England now, certainly in intertidal areas. And we ate them to extinction. They were the most common form of marine protein. They were the most common form of protein. They were second only to bread in terms of consumption in Great Britain for a very long time. And we talk a lot today about resilience. The North Sea is going through a lot of different transitions at the moment, whether that's security, climate change, food security, water quality. And these oysters are actually a perfect example of what resilient coastlines look like. These oysters form a living concrete. They are not a beach that gets eroded away in a storm. The whole of Great Britain and the North Sea coastline used to be wrapped in these oyster reefs. Oysters also are the most incredible water filtration systems known to man. One oyster can filter 200 liters of water a day. And 200 years ago, the entirety of the North Sea would have been filtered every 50 days. And this will now never happen again in our lifetimes. These oysters are also wild fish factories. More than 90% of the fish that we would eat from the North Sea historically would have spent some of their time around an oyster reef. They were the equivalent of coral reefs. And their loss and the bulldozing of the North Sea is a significant issue to the nursery and feeding grounds of all these different fish. So Oyster Heaven as an organization has gotten quite good at restoring oyster reefs. We start in places like this. This is in the Weersmeer in the Netherlands. And we use substrates. It doesn't really matter what kind of substrate that you use. We like using clay because it's quite easy to produce. It's also a natural material, and clay erodes in the water over a predictable period of time. We preset them with oysters. And these oysters act as an incredible biosignature. The ocean is a chemical and hormonal soup. There are so many things that are triggering different behaviors in organisms. Acoustical cues also are incredibly important. And so when you've attached oysters to your substrate, you're triggering a cascade of other things to arrive. It's a really, really incredible process. And this is just 24 months later. Already, you've got an incredible explosion of biodiversity, and we restored, I think, 80% on average of the historical biodiversity. Our oysters also survive 4 to 8 times better than anything else in academic literature. And the 4 million oysters we put into the Project Aster last summer has made this the largest oyster restoration project in Europe with these survival numbers. The question then is, how do we make money from this? We are a for-profit organization. We think that biodiversity credits, carbon credits are a bit problematic at the moment. Certainly blue carbon's not really making any money in the ocean. Biodiversity markets are a long way away. And what we look for is real commercial problems that we can use oysters to solve. We talk about oysters as living infrastructure. So a great example is one of our first customers, Nestle. Nestle emits large amounts of nitrogen into the water through its cereal and dairy farms, and through its pet food company, Purina. It's one of the largest consumers of wild fish in the North Sea. We restore an oyster reef, and this oyster reef can manage a known amount of nitrogen coming off the shore. And they also generate a known amount of increased fish stock that can be put back into their pet food. And this might seem quite far out, but if you imagine an organization like Nespresso has been investing for decades tens of millions of dollars into Latin American coffee supply chains because it needs a high quality product at a reasonable price. If they don't invest, they can't supply the coffee, and then they stop selling coffee, and that's a real measurable commercial loss to the organization. This is exactly the same in the water. We talk about regenerative food systems. This is a regenerative blue food system. We don't need biodiversity credits to tell us that this is a good idea. The biodiversity credit might come later as an accounting mechanism to talk about why has the project in England performed better than the project in Denmark. But at the moment, we need to focus on business outcomes. We also work with local fishers, which is a really lovely social story that I always forget to bring in, so I put in this photograph. All of our restoration projects are delivered by fishing communities. These are often the antagonists of marine spatial change. But if you make them the co-creators and give them the first paid opportunities for the work, they become your greatest allies. And everywhere we've been, we've had amazing relationships. And we've been quite a few places. We're not only present in the North Sea, but also in the Mediterranean, the east coast of the US. We've now got 14 pilots in 7 countries, 4 multi-year, multi-million oyster projects, which are currently installation or have been developed. And 7 more contracts that should start this year, and 11 further projects in the longer term. Together, these are worth around more than 100 million in revenue. These projects also are not the end. We're using these projects to develop as the engines of our digital twin. And so we're trying to create these toolkits that other organizations can then use. So whether you're a government, you're a local river trust, you're a local fishing community, we've got a blueprint that everyone can then use, which is based off a huge track record of projects. So we can become better at modeling and predicting what's going to happen in the future. So we're trying to work to change the North Sea from looking something like this to something that looks a bit more like this. We're in early stages of the project, but I've become, very optimistic. Things come back to life a lot faster than they do in the ocean, I think, as we've realized. Creatures underwater are not fighting against gravity. They're not fighting to keep themselves warm. So the pictures that we've received from our ocean are things that I was expecting to see in 6-7 years' time, not in 2 years' time, which has given me quite a lot of optimism. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, George. Yes, let's be optimistic about the North Sea and the future of the North Sea. Thanks, both of you. So I have a few questions for you, and for the others, just feel free to ask your question in the chat, because after our little talk, we're gonna ask you a question from the floor. My first question, and I know it's gonna be a bit hard, so please be brief, each of you. It's if you could give me just some insight about how can entrepreneurs collaborate more effectively? Because you have a huge project working with researchers, policymakers, local community. If you can give us just maybe one success story and maybe one challenge also, because it's important to talk about the challenge that you had and that you overcome. I don't know which one wants to start. Yeah, Marc.
I don't know. Okay, there are several. I think the first idea is that even though we've been taught that nature is about survival through the fittest, I think that probably is more about collaboration and cooperation, and the challenge we have ahead on ourselves is tremendous. So I think that we have to change the culture from competition to collaboration. That's why from the very inception of Underwater Gardens, we created this toolbox of biotechnology as also an aim to incorporate other players. And we focused into actually looking at how much of everything needs to be put into this so that the ecosystem in itself becomes more resilient. So that's the science we've been focusing in. Also understanding that there's a lot of financing, as you were saying in the beginning, of startups, technological startups that are developing a lot of fantastic tools. And those tools need to find two things: projects where to be applied, and second, financing. So obviously, the small scale, you have some or several ways of relating, and the strategy of going in to see the big brothers of Nestlé or others is very important. It also has an impact on the inside culture of these companies. No, it creates awareness into these companies. So I think that every success story has to do with what has been shown today. No, this ability to go from the local communities to the big players, the big industrial players, put them to work together in order to create action. Because I think there's a lot of talking and very, very slow action. And the big problem that we have is that we need to accelerate, I believe, the big scale. Because small scale is a perpetuation of what we have already seen and has been done once again and again, no? Like the poet says, no? There is only the trying, no? But I think that nowadays the most important thing is to scale up in front of the reality that we have a planet in transition, in transformation, and also we have more than 8 billion people alive in the planet. No, so how do we make these two things cooperate in a way that we create an equilibrium is the big challenge. So we still don't have success stories for the big scale, and we have a lot of stories in the small scale. So the invitation here is, how can we all together create big scale operations? That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Marc.
I think the single biggest problem is financial literacy. This sector is completely dominated by academics, people working in philanthropy, engineers. And the reason that we've been able to attract pension fund money into our projects, the reason we've been able to attract, huge multinational organizations is because we're speaking the language of the capital system that we're in. I don't think that capitalism is, a great idea, but it's the idea that we've got. And unless you can talk in the right kinds of languages to show that you've got good governance, professionality, people do not think that you've got the capability to handle the kinds of money that you need. So yeah, professionality, financial literacy is a massive missing gap. I'm lucky that I spent 6 years working in asset management and pension funds. That gave me a big advantage in starting this.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and talking about financial literacy, as you said, the question for many startups is how you find the balance between your economic sustainability and the fact that you want to work in marine restoration and you want to have measurable impact. How do you?
Well, we only get paid if there is an improvement in biodiversity. That it is completely and intractably linked, coupled with each other. So we will not make money unless we improve biodiversity. That's not always the case. But luckily, if you're working on ecosystem restoration with this particular model, it's quite easy.
I believe that there is the case of the one company in particular where you have a specific talented team that has built it up. Obviously, George is super proficient. I think we like to think in terms of systemic. How can we provide a systemic approach that is allowing not one company but several companies to work into the field of restoration? I think that's the big challenge for our administrative and political forces. So it's an invitation for them to change, which is very difficult when we are under regulations that are 4 years, limited in 4 years, which means you have 2.5 that are really working, plus the extreme regulation that goes on affects the possibility for long-term visions of restoration. And that's what we need in Europe and across the world. And we need long-term visions of restoration, because restoration in the short term has a tendency to go into an anecdote. So you have a game of financing, a game of restoration, and suddenly 4 years later, the operation is over and people go. So if we want things to stay, we need to find formulas for the long-term financing of not only the action, but also the monitoring of the action and the follow-up, the scientific follow-up of the action. So the invitation for startups will be have an action that goes bottom up, but have a view that goes up to bottom, and go talk to the up stakeholders.
Yeah, the long-term vision, the political agenda is critical and challenging for that. So yeah, long-term vision is a key, of course. And regarding policy and other investment mechanism, what do you think is needed today and could be efficient to accelerate this kind of process about entrepreneurs working in generative blue economy? What would be the other keys? You say long-term vision, but do you see other things that can be done?
To my understanding, there is a fear of the career. The way careers are built goes against innovation, and we need a lot of innovation. So we need to create. We need to create sandboxes or innovation boxes, even in the sea, in front of a tendency of fear of any wrongdoing. And I tried, and I think this is good on one side, is well intended, but on the other side, it doesn't follow the reality that every day, as a society, we throw tons of garbage and contamination into our seas legally. So somehow it is a little bit absurd that for the industry that we're trying to build of restoration, we don't have, or it's so hard to get permissions. So we have a problem with permissions, and we have a permission for fear of innovation in our administrative services. So I think that is something that needs to be changed in Europe, because it has already changed in China or Saudi Arabia or these places where they are bolder, and they're going to be more advanced than the European context.
I think that one of the best ways to attract finance is to show beyond any reasonable doubt that what you're doing works repeatedly in multiple different use cases. So this map that I showed before, this is about a track record. If you say, yeah, we've got projects everywhere, 3 species of oysters, 7 different countries, and it's all doing the same thing. So you've reduced your error bars very significantly. And that can give people confidence. What people want to know is you've got a track record and you've done it before, and you move into this next risk category. And I think this is another factor of maybe conservation as we know it today, which is otherwise organizations or groups doing one project in one location, and they're trying to go through a long period of time to show that this one thing works. But there's so much variability that the same thing won't happen even if you just start the same exact project maybe a year later, because the season will be different for some reason. So getting that track record is incredibly important, and I think naturally gets missed very often.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, Marc, you wanted to add something?
No, I just agree completely with George. This is a multi-layer problem, and obviously there is the technical, the compliance, the attraction of capital, how you can insure the product, etc. And then there is how we measure the impact on the collective or in the ecosystem level, and that obviously needs monitoring, and needs monitoring the long term, and it's serious scientific analysis. And this needs to be financed. And that's one of the problems that we are seeing, that the way also how European projects are financed, which are usually periods of from 6 months to 4 years in the best of cases, then at the end it wraps up. And somehow that knowledge or the application of that knowledge is not followed. So how can we find a connection between those projects and the perpetuation, the application of that knowledge? That is one of the main questions, I believe, in the European context.
Thank you. Looking at the time, I'm going to move through the question from the audience. So just let me check. Thank you, both of you. So I have different questions from the chat. Maybe I will start with the one of Luisa. Maybe this is a question for George. I'm not sure, because he was wondering about the traceability of heavy metal within the food chain and its bioavailability to higher trophic levels. So is that something that you are looking at, or if you are studying in the model?
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, we don't eat, there's no consumption of the oysters. And I forget to mention that, but we're not eating them. There's no harvest of them. You harvest the fish that's called the oyster reef their homes. But we think about them as a factory. You don't eat the factory, you eat the products that come out of the factory. There are studies about it. And yeah, whether it's heavy metals, PFAS, microplastics, generally most things that you might eat on the planet are increasingly bad for you.
Yeah. Thank you. And I move to question. Yeah, just another question for you, George. If you can explain again the revenue model of Oyster Heaven.
Yeah, it's challenging to explain because, and this kind of comes on to there's another question I saw about biodiversity credits and nutrient credits. I think if you look at biodiversity credits are great if you are an investor that needs aggregation and standardization. It is great if you are a country that needs to have some sort of national accounting standard. It is very bad if you are a user. A biodiversity credit tells Nestle absolutely nothing. An organization has got a very, very specific issue and a very, very specific relationship with a coastline. And developing a biodiversity credit is not going to necessarily resolve whatever the resilience issue is that they're facing. So, for example, a water utility we work with water utilities, and even within a water utility, the issues that we're helping them with vary, whether you're like 10 miles that way or 10 miles that way. So there might be a bathing water issue because sewage is going out into the water and bathers can't swim for a period of time, maybe August to September. There we use oysters to help reduce the amount of algae in the water so that UV light can penetrate and reduce the amount of E. coli in the water. Every year, this water utility is fined so much money, I can't tell you exactly how much it is, for poor bathing quality. bathing water quality, it can also get rewarded for it being good bathing water quality. We say we're going to create a contract, and if we can change you from bad to okay, we'll get paid a certain amount of money. If we change it from okay to good, we'll get paid a certain amount of money, essentially a revenue share. And then the same water utility round the corner might have another issue, but it will be about nutrients, or it be too much phosphate. And then the use case will be completely different and bespoke. So there's no one rule, but what we say as an umbrella term is we're looking for organizations that have a sort of real commercial pain. We can use oysters to help resolve that pain. And then we create a bespoke multi-year contract that says, we will pay you X, Y, and Z in 27, 28, and 29 for hitting KPIs A, B, and C, which are completely specific to the contract. Once we've got this contract in place, for example, with Nestle, we can then go to an investor and we say, hey, would you like to fund us the working capital for this project? And they take a bet, not in a biodiversity credit market, but they take a bet, is Nestle going to pay their bills? Is Anglian Water going to pay their bills? And that's something that they can get behind, because at the moment, voluntary biodiversity credit markets are really challenging. I question how useful, or whether you would trigger unintended consequences with biodiversity credit markets, because if you compel an organization to buy biodiversity credits, it's essentially a tax. And there are huge industries out there that help organizations avoid paying tax. And the same thing will happen. And there'll be ways to say organizations will basically work out how to minimize their sort of on paper biodiversity exposure and minimize the amount that they need to pay for this credit. Instead, I think it's much more powerful to help organizations realize the beneficial relationship they have with nature, start looking at nature as an asset, and then make it investable. And then instead of being a taxation or a punishment, they say, actually, no, this is something we're going to report to our investors or clients as something that's adding to the long-term resilience of our organization. Biodiversity credits, again, they come in if you're trying to do national accounting or if you're an investor, but for a user, I think they cause a lot of problems.
Again, I don't think there's only one solution. I think it's systemic change that we are pushing from our different corners of the problem. And it's the systemic that needs to be changing, and whomever finds a way of accelerating, because my problem, at least personally, is the perception of that we are in a hurry, but everything is very slow, and that needs to be changed. And obviously, I think that George's approach is accelerating a part of the thing. It's going to be pushing then the regulation and then tax formation, and I think there's also as we're going to be seeing more and more climate change phenomena, like El Niño that is coming soon, probably even those that are working towards eliminating taxes are going to be put in a social problematic. They're going to be signaled with the fingers. So there's going to be a change. There's going to be a lot of roughness in that change, I believe.
And how do you see, Marc, the biodiversity credits? The idea of having
so the idea of carbon credits was the first attempt to link the natural world and the finance world, and it has its dark sides. It has also allowed for a lot of gambling. So the results are, the percentage of good results are still, to my understanding, too small. So when you talk to the financial world, they also don't understand the language. No, so there's a language problem to one side and to the other. So through the capacity to show them that complexity in nature cannot be reduced to one single metric, now they're open to something. And I think the biodiversity credit is the opportunity for that language to go further, to penetrate further into the financial mindset. So it's a cultural tool for the transformation of the financial world. How is this going to be better than carbon credits? Is it going to be used also as a speculative item? It's going to be used as a speculative item for some, but it's producing more exigence. So it's going to ameliorate the capacity for building up the possibility for big scale restoration projects. And also, not only restoration projects, but if we want to reach 30% of the ocean protected, the natural capital, and if we can measure that through the biodiversity credits, will be, I guess, so I hope, we will have more funding for marine protected areas.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I don't know, Dimitris, if I have one last question, okay. Just to be, because I think could be interesting for the people there, a really practical question, because Marc, you said you have some issue with the permits. And
depends
George,
on the world.
Yeah, you didn't talk about it, so it means that you don't have maybe a problem with the permits with the oysters. Maybe you can explain.
So we don't have one. Depending on where you're working, the requirements for your intervention change, because you might be in a really dynamic coastal area, you might be in a stagnant inland lagoon, you might be in a highly protected, triple SI marine conservation zone, Natura 2000 area, and then what is permissible changes. So I think the first thing is, don't try and force whatever. We're not an artificial reef manufacturer. I don't really care what we use, but there are some things that, depending on the situation, you do need. However, if you go back to the clay reef, the mother reef that we use, this works in a lot of places because clay is a natural material. It erodes in the water, so it's not a persistent. So in places you couldn't use granite or concrete, you can use it because we can show that it's a transient scaffolding for the reef. This is not an easy thing to get licensed. Nothing is easy to get licensed. However, because we're doing big multi-million euro projects, paying 200,000 euros for lawyers and get through your license is not, I mean, it's not fun, but it's not a problem. But if you're running a very small community project, paying 200,000 for lawyers and licensing fees is inaccessible. So I think things become, I mean, it's the same. If you're an oil and gas platform, you can spend millions on your license and you'll get it done because you can afford it. And unfortunately, the legal system is, how much can you pay it? So yeah, question of scale again. Yeah, 200,000 for a lawyer service. Yeah. What you need.
Sometimes more. But more than the amount of money, which is a reality, is the amount of time. So when we need urgent action, the administrative processes are very, very long, and that is a problem.
The rules were set up. The legal rules were set up before. I remember when I was at university, we were still talking about climax ecology, like the idea that there would be this sort of static ecosystem that everything eventually reached. And then we built our environmental protection system around freezing this idea of a sort of good baseline in place. And just in the last, 15 years, we've moved completely away from that. So we know that nature is this constantly shifting mosaic of different creatures, and it's really degraded. But our bureaucratic systems don't acknowledge the reality of this, and so you have to fight them. We get 0 points for more oysters and more biodiversity in a licensing process. We just need to show that our bricks haven't hit any worms on the head when they're put into the water. We have to jump through the same set of hoops as an oil and gas platform does. Our European bureaucratic system is not capable of understanding active nature restoration at the moment.
Thanks, both of you. But let's keep in mind the optimist ticks
Yeah.
part of it, because you are doing really great project
Yeah.
and it's working and it's moving, not fast enough, but it's on the way, and that is the most important. And I thank you you both for being there and sharing the word to the people around. And I give the floor back to Dimitris. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Marion, Marc, George, for your contributions. I think it's important to talk about the uncomfortable things because many times, like from the Food and Agriculture Organization, like they're talking about biodiversity loss, although we are trying all these years for many conservation projects and sustainable blue economy initiatives. But the gap is, although we are with a target, the gap is growing still. So the one way is to charge it, on the community of the ocean change makers, that we say, like, are we scaling the wrong solutions, or are we doing it slow, or we are not doing it correctly? But I think that is important to talk also about the trade-off of what we need to change, or some policy failures that they're happening at the moment, and also openly discuss them in order to create like a change. So um, as we see today, it's not Niche ambition, the ocean change. It's working hand in hand, like with the regenerative aquaculture, the ecosystem restorations, and also the activations of the citizens. For sure, we keep the scalability, the how quickly we can react, but also like how this can go away only from philanthropic investments, how this can be like an actual market that we can attract funds, and we can really invest in this transition. So again, a big thanks to all of you. Like, the contacts of all the speakers will be available through PHAROS project. Just to mention that our next date will be on ports. So we are focusing on the blue logistics, but also ecotourism and the sustainability movement around this area. We are meeting. Our next series will be in September. PHAROS social media and website, and keep going with the Meet the Ocean Entrepreneur series. Also, we completed our hackathon, like with more ideas around the ocean, so you can see the winners and you can support them, like in this ecosystem. Thank you very much, and look forward to see you in the next session.
A real
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you.
you.
Thanks a lot.